Hey, welcome to or welcome back to the Being Champions podcast, where our mission is to unlock and discover the key elements that defines being a champion coach and dive into the principles that create a culture where everyone thrives and wants to be a part of. And listen, I am super excited for today. I'm bringing in Vern Gambetta. And I first learned about Vern way back in 1997. I was a collegiate athlete at Wheaton College. I was a high jumper competing in track and field, and my coach, Paul Souza, kept mentioning Vern. So I found out about Vern way back in 97, and let me tell you, Vern has coached for over 56 years. He is recognized internationally as an expert in training and conditioning for sports. He's worked all over the place. He's worked in Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, of course, with USA Track and Field, working professionally in basketball, tennis, softball, swimming. He was the director of conditioning for the Chicago White Sox, director of athletic development for the New York Mets. He's also the co-founder of USA Track and Field Coaching Education Program, and he's authored several books. And the one that I first learned about was the athletic development, the art and science of functional sports conditioning. And today we talk about, Vern is actually coming out with a new book called The Complete Athlete. And I love how Vern always talks about the art and science of coaching. And today we have an amazing conversation more towards the art of coaching and how do we connect with people and connect with your athletes and seeing them as people first, athletes second. How do we develop a great culture where they thrive beyond just the scoreboard and results? And then we have an awesome conversation about how we can become better teachers. So listen, I know you're going to have so many great takeaways from this conversation. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Vern Gambetta. Vern Gambetta, welcome to the Being Champions podcast.
I'm excited to be here, Matt. Part of me, we now live in San Francisco. It's probably one of the most beautiful days today since we've been here, but it's 56 degrees. I miss the sunshine and the warmth of Florida a bit. Yeah, excited to be
Yeah, being in Sarasota for so many years, a nice little shift out there in Cali now.
Yeah. Well, this is home for us. I mean, my wife and I went to grad school at Stanford and coached at Cal, and she went to school at Stanford, and a lot of her family's from here. My family's more uh, grew up in Southern California, but it's still California, and California is quite different than Florida
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
ways.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. And
Yeah.
and Vern, just so I'm going to give some context to our listeners. So I'm a track guy. I'm a track and field guy. I
Right.
competed at Falmouth High School back in the day, and then Wheaton College in Massachusetts. And my coach, Paul Souza,
Oh,
was
yeah.
the
I know.
yeah. I know you know Paul. That's how I
Yeah.
came across your work because Souza always referenced you. So I'm like, who is this Vern Gambetta guy? So this is way back 1997. Vern was the first
Yeah.
year I was introduced to your work. But for our listeners, Vern, can you kind of catch them up real quick? Give a little bit about your background. I know you've been coaching what 56, 58 years now, but catch our listeners up a little bit about your history in coaching.
Okay. I'll try to make this brief, but I think there's a couple of highlights that are important to frame and give a context to some of my thoughts. Okay. I was
Yeah.
born and raised in Santa Barbara, California. My parents were immigrants from Switzerland, Italian part of Switzerland. Basically, had my dad had really very little education. My mother went to 3 years of school here in the States, and it was a classic American kind of success story in the sense that raised two sons, then sacrificed a lot for us so that we could get our education and that. I played football, basketball, and ran track in high school and college. I played football at Fresno State, played offensive line. Um, and then after college, I loved track and field. I didn't think I was
Uh,
good enough to do it in college, which was a mistake because decathlon was just starting. I
yeah.
started competing in the decathlon at the same time I started coaching and competed uh, until I went to, well, through 1975. At the same time I was coaching. Junior high had a great deal of success, a wonderful, wonderful group of, mainly boys, but we just started a little bit of the girls. The uh, Won a couple of postal national championships, went to Stanford, was able to coach there that year. So I went from junior high school to was the Pac-8, which was
Yeah,
really interesting to grown men or the growing men and, and that. And then went
yeah,
back to Santa Barbara High School where we really started, a school with great tradition. I had student coach there and, replaced a coach who's iconic, who won 164 dual meets and lost 24. I'd known him since I was a little kid. My dad was the
yeah,
head groundskeeper there, so I had a perspective on the school a little differently, and
yeah,
coached there, for 3 years and had just great kids again, a lot of the kids I'd had in junior high. Then went to Cal Berkeley as assistant track and head women's cross country, and then became head of both, had success, 2nd in nationals and in track, top 10, uh, each year except for the 1st year, in cross country, and then, left there and went and worked with, international caliber runners in Southern California and taught school there, and then got
yeah,
an offer I couldn't refuse to go to work in pro sports. And,
yeah,
it was probably one of the few decisions I've made in my life based on money, kinda made up for a lot of the time I worked for nothing, as you know,
yeah,
at a
yeah, that is
track and field. But anyway,
yeah,
I was director of conditioning for the White Sox for 9 years, and then left in '96 and went immediately into pro soccer with the Tampa Bay
yeah,
Mutiny, and did a lot of work in soccer until, let's see, about 2003, and then started branching out even farther into rugby, a lot of work in Australia, work internationally, and a lot of work in swimming, and, continued to work, really got, pun intended, immersed in swimming. In 2012, even though I'd always worked with swimming and spent a lot of time with swim coaches, worked day to day with the Sarasota Sharks until 2 years ago, and, that was a tremendous experience and gold
yeah,
medalist and Olympians and a lot of things like that, but not I don't dwell on the gold medalists and the Olympians, it's just the great kids that come every day and give the same amount of work and effort as the Olympians. So it's been a really fun journey, it's been a learning journey. Right
yeah,
now, I'm working with one athlete, obviously remotely because she's in Australia. She brings me there occasionally. She's probably the greatest cricket player ever. She's an iconic athlete there, played in the World Cup in soccer, scored a goal, and, so it's been fun working on lengthening her career and working with a new sport, got a new book just out, gonna come out in 2 weeks or should be out, and, looking forward to hopefully a few more years of productivity. I miss the day-to-day coaching, but I also realize that there's a time and a place when, you gotta change your role a little bit. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter that
yeah,
we have every day after preschool, and that replaces the 100 kids out coaching. She's
yeah.
it's a learn every day is a learning journey. So, anyway,
A hu
been great.
100%, very and I love, man, you kept using the word journey, right? And that's what it is, like, this coaching journey, it's the evolution, like, it's always adapting, it's always changing, it's always growing, and, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my journey, and again, I was introduced to by my coach, Paul Souza, 1990s, and as I progressed, I was a high jumper, and I was kinda middle of the road, got over 7 feet, but I knew that wasn't gonna be I wasn't gonna go to the Olympic trials and all that
Yeah,
stuff. I fell in love with the idea of coaching, right? So I started to do my research and started to learn from people. And Vern, one of my favorite books is actually sitting on my desk. I'm looking at it now and I refer to it all the time was this was my introduction to your work was the athletic development.
yeah,
Again, it's like my Bible, my go-to, just talking about and this is I think this is what drew me to you, Vern, and I have this highlighted, I have it starred, I have it in
yeah,
my notes in my phone, and it's just talking about, blending the art and science of coaching, right? And I think that's the hardest thing, Vern, because science there's
mhm,
so much science now in sports, and even now
yeah.
looking I always think about baseball and the world of analytics and looking at
Oh,
all
yeah,
that stuff. But Vern, talk to our listeners about this idea of the art of coaching versus the science of coaching. And I know you talk about in the athletic development, you say it's not a either or, it's how do
Right.
we blend these two worlds together?
Yeah, it's not either or and it's not and, it's blended. It's on my morning walk yesterday, I did brain cramps, and yesterday was knowledge, about knowledge versus, and you can learn. I mean, I have my 5 or 6 books on my desk and all the rest of the books behind me, my 5 or 6 that are go-to books in terms of science and
Yeah.
all of that, and you can learn that in a class. You can learn that in a book. You can learn that in a workshop, right? Today, you can go online on YouTube and see classic sports science people going back, seeing their talks, and that's all fine and well. But the difference maker is the art. That's how
Yeah.
you apply and the experience, and I'll use plural, the experiences. Too many people in coaching and in life say, "Oh, geez, I have 40 years experience," but you've had one experience 40 times,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
what we were saying before we came on. So it is a journey, it's a constant learning journey, and the art is the people part of it, is you can do all these, you can spend a lot of money and go out and buy all these monitors and do wellness surveys and on your
Yeah.
phone and all of that kind of stuff. And I've seen it at the basically the youth level, basically, 8th, ninth graders and swimming and in track and field on up to world-class athletes, professional athletes making more money in an hour than you and I will make in our career, and it's
Right.
so easy to just go on your phone and say, "Yeah, I didn't sleep," and that kinda stuff, where the real coaches that I've seen talk to every athlete every day, and they say, "Well, how do you do that?" Well, that's the art of it. You
Yeah.
find out,
Yeah.
you find ways to connect. There was a boy at Sarasota, Sharks who's now at the Naval Academy. His parents went to the Naval Academy. His sister's going to the Naval Academy. He was a
Yeah.
scrawny little 7th grader, kinda intimidated to be in the senior group, which is daunting,
Yeah.
with an Olympian and that kinda stuff, and just every day I made it a point to just go up and talk to him. I found out about his interest in the Naval Academy, we talked about the history and things like that, and by the time I left a year and a half ago, he's taller than me, he's bigger, and he just gave me a big hug, and he said, "Thank you, Vern,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's good enough to swim there, and those are the things, that I remember. There was a little, a boy that was in my daughter's class at Sarasota High School that, the first year I helped coach, he just come out and watch, and I got to know him, and I called him Gator because he
Yeah.
always wore Florida Gator stuff, and, and I says, "Well, Gator, you gotta come out for track and, next year." He says, "Okay." So he came out, and he had nothing. I mean, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but he finished. I said, "So you be a jumper with me, and the
Yeah.
jumpers do the sprint workout," and he did every step of every rep. He loved my daughter. My daughter was a really good sprinter. He says, "I love to watch Kristen run," and,
Yeah.
so we couldn't get him in any meets until the league meet, and it was
Yeah.
down in Port Charlotte in Charlotte, and, we could enter 3, and we had 2, and so I said, "Sam, you're gonna jump in the league meet." He goes, "Oh, man," and,
Yeah.
so he's the first jumper, and he jumps 12.6, and all the kids are cheering for him.
Yeah.
He jumped
Yeah.
13.7, and that was better than Bob Beamon, to
Yeah.
this day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the next year, he said, my daughter said she didn't run, that was a mistake. Anyway, she said, "Sam hasn't been at school lately," and I said, "We'll find out." So she found out he was at All Children's Hospital, and he was
Yeah.
dying of cancer, and I went up to see him, brought him a book, and he says, "Coach," he says, I don't know how I'll lose it talking about it," and he says, "Coach, I just wanna tell you last year was the best year of my life." He's an African American kid, came from a really tough background, and those are the things. I mean, yeah, the gold medals, the world records, all of that,
Yeah.
If you're around long enough in certain situations, those are gonna happen. Now, I certainly remember things about that, but
Yeah.
how does that happen? Where you mentioned it, where you create a culture. I've always wanted to create a culture, even in pro sports,
Yeah.
where the players, the athletes were supportive of each other, okay? And
Yeah.
that's really, really important. Culture is, you can sense it, right, when you go someplace.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
100%. Yep.
we talked about Cardinal Mooney. Uh John Haskins, the assistant coach, played at Stanford, played pro football. The head coach played at Notre Dame. Bright guys. They've
Yep.
turned the whole culture around there. Those kids they do their work with intent and purpose. There's joy. That's the other word.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
for me, and I want athletes to look forward to coming to practice,
Yeah.
not going,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's a grind." The word grind is the worst word in the English language.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a grind. Well, really? Well, then if it's a grind, go get a job and dig ditches today. Or
Right.
work like my father did during the depression where he milked a herd of cows in the morning and at night,
Yeah.
and sang to the cows, was that a grind? So, no, it's an opportunity, and I have to exemplify that as a coach. If
Yep.
I don't set that standard by now, we all have bad days, right?
Oh, yeah.
You go out
Yep.
to practice and, you've gotta be an actor. So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
so those are things that I think, I know are very important to me, and I value even more in my old age now as I see coaches and I get to consult with teams all over the world and institutes and that, and and no excuses. I can't stand excuses because little Sam Washington never made an excuse, when he was
Right.
finishing those workouts, and he basically had cancer. You never use that as an excuse, so that's what we have to remember. I hope that gives is a good idea of where I'm
Oh, hey,
coming from.
hey, where we are off and rolling here, Vernon. Like my wheels are spinning because I've been coaching 24 years now, Vernon, and I
Yeah.
often refer back to like my first year coaching, Vernon. All I wanted to do was I wanted to tell all the kids everything I knew about track and field. Right? I'm breaking down sprint mechanics. I need
Oh,
this
yeah.
inch here. I need this rate of force and this. And I forgot about all the stuff you were talking about. I forgot
Yeah.
about the people side, right? And I always
Yeah.
refer to this quote where I tell coaches as they're coming up, young coaches, is oftentimes people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right,
Care.
and it's connecting with that person first, and a lot of times and again, I fell into this trap, Vern, where I saw them as an athlete first, person second. So I think
Yeah.
just thinking about my evolution is understanding, like, we gotta win the relationship game first. I mean, one of the greatest stories I heard about Steve Kerr was they're interviewing Steve Kerr, and they asked Steve at the end of his first year coaching with the Golden State Warriors, they asked Steve, like, "Hey, Steve, what was the most important game you won?" And, like, of course, we all thought Steve was gonna talk about, game 5 against the Thunder or whatever it was, but
Yeah.
Steve said, "No, the most important game I won was winning the relationship game."
Yeah. 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 No, for sure, for sure. A good friend of mine, uh, who's an Australian, was there the year they won the 73 games, and that was and that was he was out a lot with bad back and that. And one of the things that he said walking in, and he'd worked with numerous sports, wonderful guy, Lachlan Benfold. And he said the biggest thing that he took away from the Warriors, Steve, Curry, and that was joy. They
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
that's where, and remember that's almost 15 years ago now, too. And I
Yeah.
remember Locke telling me that, and I thought, that's something I need to focus in on a little bit more too.
Yeah.
So like, like now, Elise Perry, that we talk on the phone and talk yesterday, and I'm programming the workouts. I know her well now. She came to Sarasota and lived with us for 10, 15 days. But we ended up, okay, how was the pattern? Good, good. We ended up 15-minute conversation talking about training 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Like our
Yeah.
things, how's your parents? Her dad has um Parkinson's disease, all of that kind of stuff, because that's more important that I get a feeling for her and how, she's only an athlete a small time of the day, and
Yeah.
on the other hand, I'm a big believer in the concept and the application of being a 24-hour athlete. You can't be a
Yeah.
star on the field and a jerk off the field. And so the
Right.
great ones you see are just really good, you know, really good people,
Yeah.
just good people. But a lot of that's what we do. Coaching is teaching, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we
100%.
emphasize that, and you mentioned the technical stuff. I still at times when somebody brings me in, I'll get caught up and then I'll stop. Wait a minute. Now, this is the easy part.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
You've been coaching this kid for 5 years, and you're gonna bring me in, and in one session, I'm gonna now wait a minute. So let's kind of figure out what's going on here,
Yeah.
in that too. So, and there's, sometimes it's simple things. The other I know I'm going nuts here, but the other thing is the basics. So when you talk about the technical aspect, look, I've got, here's a whole book here on, uh, my I mean, it's a huge book on high intensity interval training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great book, but, I can summarize high intensity interval training or interval training in 3 minutes, and I've gotta teach that
Right.
to a soccer player who doesn't speak real good English,
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that. Gotta get the point across,
Yeah.
And, so it's what are the basics? What are the basics? How can I don't wanna say because simplify it to a lot of people means evokes dumbing down, but
Yeah.
I've gotta be able to get those key elements. Your first day, you have track and those kids, and you have the sprinters and hurdlers, and you're gonna teach them, A skips or something like that. Well, first, can they skip?
Yeah.
Can they just skip?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so but we get so excited as coaches that we wanna go to the next step, and this is one of the biggest things that I see today as a deficiency in coaches, and a lot of it relates to, what we see, the access of YouTube, the access of social media,
Right.
and a
Yeah.
lot of times what I do in talking to coaches in our workshops and that is teach them how to vet some of the noise that comes
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
We're bombarded by. Go back to the basics. Understand if you listen to our newest podcast with Larry, a guy named Larry Knuth, went to Fresno State. He's 6 years older than me,
Yeah.
and we both grew up in Southern California, which was the epicenter of track and field for many, many, many years. And, being able to go over and go down to UCLA and talk to Tom Tellez, and he was open,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is just so important, looking, in your community. I didn't do a good enough job, I don't think, in Sarasota of tapping into some of the people that were there until we lived there 36 years
Right.
until the last, 5 or 6 years, and so that's something I would do over for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I love how you talk about the teaching side. This has kind of been like my jam lately, there, Vern, is learning how to be a better teacher. I think that's a lesson we all need to understand as coaches, that we are teachers. And how do you, like, with all your experience, Vern, how do you help coaches and how do you help athletes? We always talk about over here at Canterbury, like, and I got this from John Kessel. John Kessel is talking about this is no longer
Oh,
a
John
skill.
Kessel's awesome.
He's
Anything you
amazing.
get from John Kessel is gold.
Yeah, it's and I was lucky enough, Vern, I was actually in John's place in June out in Colorado, and
Oh,
John stresses that this is no longer a skills competition, this is a learning competition. So with that being said, Vern, like, with all your experience, how can we help coaches learn better? But more importantly, how do we help our athletes learn better, faster, and learning actually sticks?
make it sticky is the key, and
Yeah,
I each first of all, philosophically, each day is an opportunity to get better.
yeah,
So, for
yeah,
example, I worked for 3 years with Venice Volleyball, and, from that,
yeah,
10 who they are,
yeah,
and every day I worked with them in the off season, even in season, I would do a 5-minute lesson at the start of practice. So I
Okay.
had before warm up, I'd warm him up, and then it was hard for him at first, but then kids would rotate out, and sometimes I just talk to him, and sometimes I'd have some physical prep stuff to do. So as a teacher, you're a teacher now, you have a lesson plan. What are you gonna achieve? So you make sure that they're aware of the objectives of the lesson, and this is how we're going to achieve it. Okay. And then at the end of practice or at the end of the strength training session or whatever it is, we got together on, and there was a whiteboard, and it was 3 minutes, not 5 minutes now, they're tired, okay, and
Yeah.
I'd summarize what we did today, what we learned today, so that's, that's bracketing so that's just good teaching. I learned that
Right.
in student teaching. So, and then it's create an atmosphere. And that's the big part again, where the it's a learning atmosphere. Make sure that the parents and everybody knows that you're constantly learning and it's a learning process. Okay. And
Okay.
I believe I'm a big reader, as you probably know, and
Yep.
read 3 books in the last 4 days. I've got maybe too much time on my hands now. But, so what are you doing? The question that I would ask to the coach when I come in, what's your learning plan? What's your
Yeah.
learning plan?
Yeah.
Who are you learning from? What are you learning? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are you gonna do to reconcile the 2? Okay?
Yeah.
And I ask when I did a lot of work in Trinidad for about 2011 to 2015. And that's what I ask. I asked them to keep a log, a coaching log,
Yeah.
where they have to, they have to define their objectives for the workout, evaluate the workout, and then recommendations for the next thing, and I think everybody has to do that. You're an AD, you probably can't require that, but you can strongly suggest it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, your academic teachers are asked to do that,
Yeah.
evaluated on their progress and their learning and, that kind of stuff. So that's to me, a real big part of it. And, yeah, I don't think it's too, and then don't get caught up in bells and whistles and shiny things, all right?
Yeah.
Uh I was laughing, I'll show you right here. I have 2 stopwatches. This one was given to me by 2 of my athletes in 1983, Seiko, and it also was like this was the cat's meow. It had a printer and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and this one goes back to =79 at Cal Berkeley. It's another Seiko, but it's a little simpler to use, and they still both work.
Yeah.
And I use them when appropriate and that kind of stuff. But all the stopwatches, it gives you a number, doesn't it? And
It does.
so let's say today, we're gonna do, 6 200s. It's November, and you've got a 49-second 400-meter runner, a guy. We're gonna do 6 200s in 29 with 3 minutes rest. And you can't be there today,
Yeah.
okay? So he times it or somebody times him and, you get, "Wow, this look," and he ran the last one in 26:9. Okay,
Yeah.
great work, but you didn't see it.
Yeah.
So then the next day he comes out, you're there, he starts to warm up and he's stomping the ground. He's just wasted because
Yeah.
he left the session in that workout and ruined the
Mhm.
whole rest of the week. You had the context, he didn't have the context. So
Right.
again, the stopwatch gives you a number. All of
Yeah.
this technology gives you a number. Heart rate, you can fool a lot of people with heart rate monitors,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yep.
and that kind of stuff. So, coach, this is what I've started to say, Matt. Coach the person in front of you, not
Yeah.
some mythological, so you've got a 49-second, he's a sophomore. Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That kid could run, 47 point, maybe 46 high when he's a senior.
Yeah.
How? How is he gonna do that? And it's coaching the person in front of you. All of a sudden, his dad gets laid off. He's gotta now go to work after school. Those are all factors that you have to
Yeah.
take into consideration, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, does that answer the question, in terms
Yeah,
of
it
teaching?
it does. It again, you got my wheels spinning too. So I love this, like, going back and forth. Like, I love these conversations, Vern, because again, it's I think you said it early in the answer where as coaches, we have to be continuous learners too. And it's not just having all the knowledge, right? And I talk to coaches and I talk to athletes about this too. It's not just having the knowledge, it's backing it up with our action, right? Because if we
Yeah,
have all the knowledge in the world, Vern, and we have no action, well, guess what? The answer is still going to be zero. You're right where you started at because you're not
yeah.
applying it. So I think that's the big thing as coaches, as leaders, like we're the ones that have to model it first. Are we being continuous learners? I always say autopilot's the death of learning. And again, we fall
Oh,
into that trap a lot because it's like, well, I've coached for 24 years. I've done this. I already know what I'm doing. And we shift more into this expert mindset rather than being a beginner's mindset.
yeah. If the farther when as soon as we get away from the beginner's mindset, that's
Mhm.
where the problems start. When you become an expert, and I mean, some people label me an expert. That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
huge responsibility because when somebody brings me in, flies me to Australia to be with the rugby sevens or something like that, I've got to make sure obviously they know my qualifications, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
they don't know that, you know, I mean, I'm out there putting the cones out. And
Yeah.
and I remember the assistant coach said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, you're doing this, I'm helping you."
Yeah.
Right? What's wrong with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And the athletes see you. So they brought this guy from the United States, and he's putting the cones out, and then he's taking the practice pit. All of a sudden, I'm connecting with them all.
Yeah.
The athlete. It's not phony. It's
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
and so yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw that in pro basketball and pro baseball, trip with the Bulls, and I picked up the ball bag. And somebody says, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because it needs to get inside the gym. We were on the road."
Yeah.
I mean, like, hello?
Yeah.
There's no pecking order here, and in baseball, when I'd be out there early work and there was an infield coach working with an infielder and they had 50 balls and then they're all over, let's go pick them up. I'd help them pick
Yeah.
them up. There's an opportunity to talk to the coach. Now, what do you think if we work on this and then to talk to the player,
Yeah.
So look for opportunities. Look
Yeah.
for opportunity. The biggest opportunity, Matt, that's wasted is during warm up. You
Yes. Yep.
see,
Yep.
my really good friend, John Laraldi, uh, said this. He coaches at a small school in Carpinteria, just south of Santa Barbara. And he said the biggest thing every year with our coaches, when I take him in warm up, he's a coach, coaches now sprints, hurdles, and jumps. And they're all standing over there talking about, what they watched on Netflix last night,
Yeah.
instead of being involved, And I had my boss with the White Sox call a special meeting in spring training,
Yeah.
10-minute meeting, and I got up and I said, "You guys are wasting an opportunity to coach." Because during my time, they'd all stand there and talk about well, we won't tell what they were talking
Yeah.
about, but
Yeah.
anyway, and he made it now, anytime you make it a rule, that's also, chancy, but
Yeah.
I had to prove to them that this was a valuable time for them to help integrate what I was doing in terms of physical preparation with baseball. So,
Yeah.
you know, so enough said.
I love that, and as you're talking about that, Vern, like, the word that pops in my head is that's culture. That's
It's
what we're
culture. You create
developing
a
as coaches, right? We're the ones that create the experience. We're the ones that create the environment. Spending those 5 minutes times during warm-ups, that's our chance to connect. I always challenge our coaches where we call it the rule of one. So I got this from, Jerry Lynch in The Way of Champions. Rule of one
oh,
is
yeah.
just connect with one person. Every day, just one person every day. Spend an extra 5 minutes with one person. And that person is going to feel like we call it the river effect. They're going to feel like they're relevant, important, valued, empowered, and respected. And again, it goes
Yeah.
back to that word culture. What are we creating? You're talking about picking up the ball bag. I think of the all Blacks where they talk about sweep the sheds. And
Keep the shit.
you just got me you got me onto the new book, Become Unstoppable. So I'm about to dive
Oh,
into
it's
that
awesome.
one, the All Blacks. So it's one of those as coaches, like we have to be mindful because culture is a living, breathing organism. It's always forming. We just have to be mindful of what we're forming.
Yeah, it's forming and it's, undefinable, but you can feel it. You can
Yeah.
feel it
Yes.
when you're at a place that has that,
Yeah.
you just walk in and you just go, "Yeah, this is something's really, really cool here," for sure. Yeah, the sweep the sheds things is interesting. You'll see in Anoka's book that's
Yeah.
taken he's taken that. And, I never was a Bobby Knight fan. I just didn't like I despise that style of coaching and that. But it's interesting. A friend of mine was at University of Wisconsin, conditioning coach, and the visiting team, basketball team, locker room was right next to the one weight room.
Yeah.
And he said, every team would come in here, they'd play, and it was trash. There was orange peels on the floor, tape, that kind of stuff. Anytime Indiana came, the locker room was cleaner when they left than when they came in.
Yeah.
Now I wish he would have valued some other things,
Yeah.
okay? I mean, making a value judgment, but those things are important. The uniform, it's called a uniform because everybody so respect, and that's the thing with the All Blacks,
Yeah.
respect the jersey, okay?
Yeah.
The coach that I took over from, that was built he had 2 rules,
Yeah.
and this was he retired in 75. Wear the uniform and be on time.
Yeah.
Where the uniform was special.
Yeah.
If you were a Don, you wore this uniform, the same uniform, and I asked his permission, and the next year, I changed it. I
Yeah.
changed it, so if you made varsity, boy or girl, you had a special uniform that
Yeah.
said Dons. It was new, and then the traditional uniform was what you wore when you earned the right to wear the new uniform, so to speak,
I
and
love that.
so, I
I
mean,
love it.
those kind of things, and he had a thing where it was a big canvas tarp
Okay.
that they'd put it in the middle of the field at home meets, and then we'd carry it to away meets. That was home. And when you were a senior, you got to write your name on the tarp.
I love that. Love
And
it.
I mean, there was state champions, guys that went on to play pro football,
Yeah.
little things like that, that if you could, they're easy to overlook, but they were valued. The players
Yes.
talk about it,
Yeah.
kids talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, man. With the whole jersey thing, I know with the All Blacks that the challenge is to leave it in a better place, and we talk about that a lot on our campus.
Yeah.
Every time you put that jersey on, it's like we frame everything around story. It's like when you put the jersey on, you're adding to this story, right? So the challenge is
Yes.
by the time you hand the jersey in, it's like I'm handing in this incredible story. I'm connecting my past, my present, and then future players. And again, you say culture is a feeling, and if it feels good, we function well. So again, it comes
Yeah.
back to us as coaches. Like, what are we creating for our athletes? What are we creating for our school community? How are we doing things that's going beyond just the science, beyond the scoreboard, and doing things bigger than ourselves? I think that's
Yeah.
the number one thing that we get to do as coaches. That's why I love coaching is we get to pull the best out of our student athletes where it goes beyond just being an athlete. We're developing great humans.
You're developing great humans because you're creating a microcosm of life every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
is what it comes down to. You gotta make instant decisions. You've gotta, there's yeah, and you gotta get I say this a lot now, a lot of people, not because I said it, but you've gotta the great ones are comfortable with being uncomfortable all the time. And
Yes.
you think
Yeah.
about your kids that you have there, I mean, they want, you know, Summer McIntosh, who swam for the Sharks, who's multiple world record Olymp um, she was never comfortable. I
Yeah.
mean, she made
Yeah.
the other she challenged me every day,
Yeah.
to be better, and
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was like that. That's why, it took somebody like Phil Jackson a couple of years to rein him in because he was fierce, and
Yeah.
I've never been
Yeah.
around, uh all these Hall of Famers and superstars, it was a practiced like he played, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. People say, "Well, look, we gotta replicate the game." No, you gotta distort the game. You gotta
Yes.
distort the
Yeah.
you're gonna so today we're gonna run, that same quarter miler now. Now it's February. We're gonna run 6 times 150 with a minute rest, and then that's what you tell him. He does the 6 times 150 and say, "Okay, now we're gonna go a 200 at race pace
Yeah.
as soon as he finishes."
Yeah.
See? "So, how'd you do?" "He didn't expect it." "Well, we're preparing you for the unexpected,
Yeah.
because that's what's gonna happen." You don't do that very often, but you have tricks like that in your repertoire.
Give him a little curveball. I love it. And listen, Vern, I feel like I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but to kind of wrap up here, Vern, think back. I always like asking this question because you've been coaching forever. So I want you to think back to young Vern, first year coaching Vern. Like what advice, with all the lessons you've learned over the years, what's the number one lesson you think you would tell first year Vern going into his first year coaching?
Well, first year Vern was 21 years old, and I was
Yeah.
coaching 18-year-olds, and
Yeah.
most of them grew up in the same neighborhood where I lived. I knew their
Yeah.
brothers and sisters and that, and I wouldn't do anything different than what I did. My best man said in teaching, he said, "Don't smile until Thanksgiving." So I
Yeah.
remember John O'Malley, my best friend's younger brother, Annie, and I was taking roll and he started to call me Vern. It's Coach Gambetta.
Yeah.
Is all. So, yeah, recognize the responsibility that you have, and that didn't mean that I was stern,
Right.
that I and be professional. What I see happening with young coaches today, male and female, is not dressing professionally, not acting professionally.
Yeah.
I mean, friends with the athletes,
Yeah.
and that, so that's really important. And I think I want to pass on one lesson.
Yes.
The coach who had the greatest influence on me and the person who had the greatest influence on my life, aside from my parents, was my basketball coach. And then he was a history teacher at Bishop Garcia Diego High School in Santa Barbara. He's a little bald headed guy, smoked, smoked in the locker in the locker room, but
Yeah.
he was a bomber pilot in World War II, okay? And I thought he
Yeah.
was older than God, but he was probably just about 50 years old when then.
Yeah.
So all our coaches were of the greatest generation, and, he was the consummate. He didn't coach basketball, I realize now, and I went back. Well, he taught basketball, and he was
Yeah.
a terrific history teacher.
Yep.
Taught when he talked about D-Day, he had flown over D-Day,
Yeah.
and that. So he taught basketball, but he taught life. He made
Yeah.
me grow up. He was so hard on me. And I remember going home one night at dinner. Now you have to understand our family, very Catholic, Italian, and that.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
started complaining. My dad put the fork down and he said, in Italian, he says, "You never say anything like that about a coach or teacher again."
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the parents, but that was, and they backed him up. And he was, and we became really great friends. He came to my wedding. I went back during the summers when I was playing football in college and
Yeah.
coached summer league. I learned about coaching from him. Now I got insights, that transcended basketball. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I love it.
there,
Vern, I think it's a great place to end right there. But what were you
right.
gonna say?
Well, I'm
But
gonna say, we have, as coaches and teachers and adult role models, we have a tremendous responsibility,
yeah.
and, particularly in today's crazy, society, regardless of politics or whatever, we've gotta be a rock. We've gotta be a rock for those youngsters, to give them a good example. Well, good. I
I
appreciate the
love it, Vern. I love it. And I hear the word mentor, and I think back to, Vern, this is 1997 when Coach Sousa's like talking about Vern Gambetta and thinking about my evolution. And the athletic development, reading that book and always learning from you. And 4 or 5 years ago, you did a workshop for our coaches. So I
Right.
can't thank you enough, Vern, for always being there. Anytime I hit you up, I just appreciate you. This was an amazing conversation. I can't wait for your new book to come out. So the Complete Athlete's coming out, what, about 2 weeks, you were saying?
Hopefully about 2 weeks. I think
Okay.
that's that's the whole podcast's story of that,
Yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah. That's always the
but
madness. But 2 weeks, the Complete Athlete. Hopefully, the Complete Athlete will be out. And then, if our listeners wanted to connect with you further, how could they do that? Because I know you have the Gain Network, but tell our listeners how they could reach
yeah,
out and learn more from you.
I mean, my email is, G as in go, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, S as in Sam, coach@gmail.com. I'm on, Facebook, it's my name, Vern Gambetta. Uh, X or Twitter or whatever it is, at Coach Gambetta. And then on Instagram, I'm not sure, it's either
Okay.
Coach Gambetta or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not real good. I just got a message from one of my high school classmates 2 days late. Anyway, I somehow on those social media stuff, I forget I don't always get the messages, but
Yeah.
please feel free to email me, and if it's something more pressing, have them talk to you, and you
Okay.
just give me a shout. Remember, we're 3 hours different, so,
Yeah,
time.
awesome. I'll put that all in the show notes. But again, Vern, I can't thank you enough for being on the Being Champions podcast. This was amazing. I have so many notes. I know our listeners are going to, so I can't thank you enough, man.
Thank you very much. Have a great one. Take care.
You too.